Not far from the Mount of Olives, we find the village of Al-Elzaria. It looks like just another of those settlements in the Holy Land, where houses climb tier on tier up the slopes of the hillside. Most of people will scarcely be aware that the small village in Jesus' times was known by Bethany, where Jesus worked one of his greatest miracles. Come with me on a journey, the quest for answers, looking for Jesus in the Holy Land.
The little village of Bethany on the eastern slope of the Mount of Olives, about 3 kilometers from Jerusalem, has traditionally been identified with the present-day West Bank city of Al-Elzaria, which means place of Lazarus. Bethany may also be identified with the Old Testament village of Ananiah, mentioned in Nehemiah chapter 11, verse 32.
Bethany was the scene of some of the most important events of Jesus' life. Here dwelt Mary and Martha and their brother Lazarus. Here Jesus, after the labors of the day in the city, frequently found a hospitable and quiet home. Here Jesus raised Lazarus from the grave. Here Jesus was anointed by Mary for his burial at dinner in the house of Simon the leper, a week before the crucifixion. And near here, in close vicinity and in full view, Jesus was parted from his disciples and carried up into heaven.
Christian churches have been built here since the early centuries. In AD 333, the anonymous pilgrim of Bordeaux reported seeing the crypt where Lazarus had been laid to rest. By the 14th century, the churches were in ruins, and the original entrance to the tomb had been turned into a mosque. In the 16th century, the Franciscans cut through the soft rock to create the present entrance.
Today's pilgrims enter from the street down a flight of 24 well-worn and uneven steps to a vestibule. 3 more steps lead to the burial chamber, little more than 2 meters long. This is where Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead. The present Catholic Church with mosaics depicting the events that occurred here was built in 1954. Architect Antonio Barluzzi contrasted the sadness of death with the joy of resurrection by designing a crypt-like windowless church into which light floods from the large oculus in its dome.
A Greek Orthodox church dedicated to Simon the leper is located to the west of the tomb. Since 2005, Bethany, which is in the West Bank, has been cut off from Jerusalem by Israel's separation wall. The wall actually cuts across the main street, making a serious impact on the lives of residents and on the town's economy. What used to be a 10-minute drive from the Mount of Olives to Bethany now requires a lengthy detour. So the tomb of Lazarus has become isolated from the normal pilgrim and tourist route.
The public ministry of Jesus lasted 3.5 years, from his baptism to his crucifixion. In this series, we've highlighted just a small fraction of the things Jesus said and did. There's so much more to dialogue about. But in this episode today, we'll turn the corner and begin our journey down the road that leads to the cross. Today, we'll focus on the resurrection of Lazarus. It was just after Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead that the Jewish religious leaders decided Jesus must be stopped. The chief priests and Pharisees called a meeting of the Jewish High Council, the Sanhedrin, which was comprised of 71 men. They discussed the fact that many Jews had already come to believe Jesus was the Messiah. "What are we going to do?" they asked each other. "This man certainly performs many miraculous signs. If we allow him to go on like this, soon everyone will believe in him. Then the Roman army will come and destroy both our temple and our nation." They couldn't deny the resurrection of Lazarus. Their concern was that so many Jews were accepting Jesus as the Messiah, that the Romans would view this messianic movement as a revolt against Rome. The members of the council feared that the Romans would come and destroy both the temple and the entire Jewish nation. It was Caiaphas, the high priest, who declared that it was better for one man to die than for the entire nation to perish. So that was their conclusion. Jesus must die. Let's take a look at this amazing miracle, the miracle that precipitated the plot to kill Jesus. Mary, Martha, and Lazarus were siblings and were very close to Jesus. In Luke 10:38, we read that Martha opened her home to Christ. He became family to them. Martha was a woman of action, often busy with meal preparations and taking care of people. Mary, on the other hand, loved to sit at the feet of Jesus and listen to him teach. It was this same Mary who poured costly perfume on Jesus and wiped his feet with her hair. But that's another story for another day. Anyhow, Lazarus became seriously ill. The two sisters sent a messenger off to Jesus with an urgent request. "Lord, the one you love is sick." They expected that Jesus would come immediately. He had healed so many people. Surely he would hurry to Bethany to heal his dear friend Lazarus. The Bible records that when Jesus received this message, he stated, "This sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it." And Jesus stayed where he was 2 more days. Now, imagine the conversation which must have occurred when the messenger returned and spoke with Mary and Martha. They would surely have queried him, "Did you find Jesus?" "Yes." "Did you give him our message?" "Yes." "Well, what did he say?" "He said, 'This sickness will not end in death.'" Think of it. This sickness will not end in death. Tell me, if you had been Mary or Martha, how would you have understood Christ's comment? The sisters would have assumed that Lazarus would not die. That's not what Jesus said exactly. He said this sickness won't end in death. But what the sisters heard was Lazarus won't die. So it must have come as a real crisis of faith from Mary and Martha when Lazarus did die. I mean, it's bad enough when Jesus doesn't come when you expect him to come. But when you believe Jesus to have said, "Don't worry, your brother won't die," and then he does die, things have gone from bad to worse. And this must have been an absolutely heart-rending experience for those two sisters. Meanwhile, 2 days later, Jesus tells his disciples, "Let us go back to Judea. Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going there to wake him up." The disciples thought, if Lazarus sleeps, he'll get better. Isn't that what you're supposed to do when you're sick? Get plenty of rest? But Jesus had been speaking about his death, so he told them plainly, "Lazarus is dead. And for your sake, I'm glad that I was not there so that you may believe. But let's go to him." By the way, the Bible consistently calls death a sleep. Over 50 Bible verses refer to death as a sleep. And by the time Jesus and his disciples got to Bethany, Lazarus had already been in the tomb 4 days. Many people from Jerusalem had come to comfort the sisters on the loss of their brother. Jesus was on the outskirts of town when Martha got word that he was coming. So she slipped out of the house to go and meet him. Listen to this amazing conversation between them. Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give you." Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha said to him, "I know that he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day." Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me, though he may die, he shall live. And whoever lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this?" She said to him, "Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who is to come into the world." Did you notice her very first words? "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." Can you feel her pain? Here's the Jeff Potts paraphrased version. "Lord, where were you? We sent you a message. We know you got the message. Why didn't you come? You could have saved him." Jesus said, "Your brother will live again, Martha." Martha agrees. "I know," she says, "in the resurrection at the last day." But then Jesus makes this outstanding claim. He says, "I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me, though he may die, he shall live." Wow. I am the resurrection and the life. What a claim. Jesus is telling Martha, you won't have to wait until the resurrection at the last day. I am the resurrection. Whoever lives and believes in me shall never die. Martha, Jesus asks, do you believe this? And Martha makes this profound statement of personal faith. Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who is to come into the world. Martha went back to the house to get her sister. And when Mary came to meet Jesus, she fell sobbing at his feet and said exactly the same thing Martha had said minutes before. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. The mourners had followed Mary to Jesus. They too were weeping loudly. It was a tear-jerking scene. Jesus was deeply moved. John 11:35 says, Jesus wept. This is the shortest verse in the whole Bible, just 2 words. Jesus wept. He was moved by the tears of the people he loved. Be assured, my friend, when you weep, Jesus is touched by your tears also. He asked the sisters where they had laid their brother, so they took him to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. Traditionally, Jews bury their dead very quickly, within 24 hours. Lazarus had already been in the tomb 4 days. Jesus gave the order to take away the stone, but Martha objected. She anticipated a horrible odor. But Jesus insisted, saying, Did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? So they removed the stone. Then Jesus stepped closer to the tomb, looked up, and prayed, Father, thank you for hearing me. You always hear me. But I said it out loud for the sake of these people standing here, so that they will believe you sent me. Then, with a loud voice, Jesus shouted, Lazarus, come out! No one uttered a sound. Everyone waited with bated breath. And then they heard it, a stirring sound coming from inside the cave. Moments later, Lazarus shuffled out of the tomb, still wrapped in his white linen grave clothes. The crowd must have been speechless with amazement. Then surely someone must have shouted, He's alive! He's alive! It was true. The man who had been dead in the grave for 4 days was alive again. Take the grave clothes off him, Jesus exclaimed. Let him go.
Lazarus means whom God helps. You may be familiar with the story of the raising of Lazarus. Yet there are a few commands that Jesus gave in the story, which we need to heed as well. You can be a Lazarus today. You can be one whom God helps. Christ's 3 commands each begin with the letter R: remove, respond, and release.
Remove. Jesus, once more deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. Take away the stone, he said. This stone is what separated Lazarus from Jesus. It was keeping Jesus from being nearer to Lazarus and Lazarus closer to Jesus. So the Lord wanted it removed. Do you need to remove something between you and Jesus? What is that thing that stands between you and Jesus? It may be some sin, or it may not be bad things or sinful things at all. It could be things like a relationship, your job, a hobby, your schedule. It could be a hidden sin.
Remove the stone. Believe and trust in Jesus, and you will see the glory of God, but only if you respond. Jesus called in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The dead man came out. It wasn't enough to hear from Jesus. Obedience needed to take place. What if, from inside of the grave, Lazarus yelled back, "I don't want to come out. It's comfortable in here. Nobody judges me in here. And if I come out, people are going to expect me to be different." That's the challenge that we face. Jesus is calling each one of us by name to come out of the grave, to be different people, to not stay in the darkness, to not stay in the place of death, to not stay in the grave clothes, but to live a life with Jesus, an abundant life.
Jesus wants you to remove what separates you from him, but he will not force you to come out. You must choose to obey him. Friend, whatever that command may be, obey the Lord and let him deal with the consequences that follow. Do you need to respond to a command of Jesus? You can go from darkness to light, from death to life, from carnal to spiritual. Christ is calling, but you must respond and heed his call. It is then that you will find release. The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. Jesus said to them, "Take off the grave clothes and let him go." A miracle took place, but Lazarus was still quite limited. Jesus orders, "Free him from the death wrap and let him go."
What are you all wrapped up in today? Old habits, sinful behavior, painful memories which need to be gently and lovingly removed? They are no longer needed like grave clothes. They need to be unwrapped and removed. Allow the Lord to release you from anything that is limiting you.
The New Testament writers were absolutely clear about who Jesus is. They said Jesus is God's anointed one, the Messiah, the Christ, the Son of God. However, some people today suggest that Jesus was not the Son of God, just a good man. Let's think about that for a moment. Jesus actually claimed to be the Son of God. So, if in fact he was not the Son of God, then he could not have been a good man. Since Jesus claimed to be the Son of God, then either he was the Son of God, or he was a liar and an impostor, or a self-deluded crazy man. But we don't have that option of a good man. There are only three options: Son of God, impostor, or crazy man. One day Jesus asked his disciples, "Who do you say that I am?" Peter replied, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." And Jesus told Peter, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, but by my Father in heaven." Think back to the conversation we looked at earlier today between Jesus and Martha. Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me, though he may die, he shall live. And whoever lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this?" She said to him, "Yes, Lord, I believe that. You are the Christ, the Son of God." Allow me to paraphrase what Jesus told Martha. He said, "I am the life giver. I raise the dead. Whoever believes in me will live forever." Then he asked Martha, "Do you believe this?" He replied, "Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God." She said the exact same thing Peter did. Friend, by raising Lazarus from the dead, Jesus substantiated his claim to be the life giver, the Messiah, the Son of God. So let me ask you today, who do you say Jesus is?
To have been present with Jesus when he walked these dusty roads would have been amazing. His compassion touched the lives of real people. This is reflected in the song, Dance, as I thought about how amazing it would have been to have been the recipient of the healing grace that Jesus offered. An encounter with Jesus made a profound difference in the lives of those to whom he ministered. Jesus wants to touch us and to speak courage and hope to us today. Through the ministry of the Holy Spirit, we can be transformed and moved as well. And I believe that we can experience this saving grace as we pray and as we reach out to Jesus personally. He wants us to dance through life in the assurance of his love and his blessing. He was just a beggar, a lonely beggar by the road. A fellow sinner with a heavy load. He was wondering why it had to be. His heart was longing just to be set free. Lord, you touched him and he danced. He danced. She was just a lady sobbing in a room. A broken woman wondering what to do. She was longing for a better day, 'cause her daughter had passed away. Lord just spoke and she just danced. She danced. In your healing presence, we are blessed. May your grace among us give us rest. Give us strength and power to do the best. Speak a word, make us dance. Dance. We're just beggars, broken beggars by the road. We're like that lady, that broken lady in the room. If you touch us, we can be renewed. If you bless us, we'll be born anew. Speak the words and make us dance. Dance. He was just a beggar, a lonely beggar by the road.
Thank you for this beautiful song. Let's pray. Dear God, thank you for sending Jesus Christ. Thank you for Jesus, the resurrection, the life giver. I pray that you bless everyone that is watching us today, that they may accept Jesus in their lives and live a beautiful life with Jesus. In his mighty name I pray. Amen. Dear friend, thank you so much for watching us today. Don't forget to share the quest for answers, looking for Jesus in the Holy Land with your friends and relatives. Please visit our website. On our website, you can leave us a message, your prayer request, and order a copy of today's show or the complete series. If you feel moved to support our ministry, you can make your donation on our website as well. I hope to see you soon again. And remember, life is beautiful with Jesus.